What's going on, y'all? It is Wayno here, you know what I'm saying, on the behalf of Community Media. And I'm sitting with the brother Tunde Onakoya. Did I say your name correctly?
Yeah.
How you doing, first and foremost?
I'm doing okay. It's my first time here in America, so I'm still grappling with the weather and with the people. The people here are so polite. Everyone, especially in Athens, everyone has a smile and they greet you first, and that's culture shock for me.
So we're gonna make sure that we keep you away from New York, because that's where I'm from. People aren't as nice there. No, New York people are we are nice, but we just a little bit on edge, and a lot of that is because of our weather. You know what I mean? Like some days it's hot, some days it's freezing cold when it's supposed to be hot, some days it's hot when it's supposed to be cold. So it's like it's kind of tricky to us. I think it tricks our minds, but it's good that that you're enjoying yourself here.
Yeah, I'm having a great time.
Yeah,
I'm heading to New York next week though, so.
Oh, awesome.
Honeymoon will be over by then.
Oh yeah. I mean, listen, man, bring yourself a little jacket just in case. You know what I mean? It might snow. You know what I mean? Bring yourself a little jacket. But Tunde, I feel like I said, I was just looking up a few things about you, and I seen that you got this thing, that you created, Chess in the Slums. Yeah. And where I'm from, everybody calls it the trenches. And what I mean? I think that sometimes people are kind of addicted to their trauma, where we kind of I'll say where I'm from, we kind of glamorize like our unfortunate shortcomings, right? So we try to make the best out of it. But hearing something like Chess in the Slums, I was just like really intrigued about what it entails and what it's about.
Yeah, so Africa is a country with so much potential, right? Mm-hmm. And one thing I've come to really understand is, potential is nothing if it's not realized. And especially in those very impoverished communities that a lot of people don't pay attention to, right? And I believe that to do anything truly meaningful, you need to have a personal connection to it. So I grew up in the slum, right? Mm-hmm. In Nigeria, back home in Lagos. It's a really small, community where, we didn't have access to the very basic things. Mm-hmm. And it was a really hard life. I mean, like you mentioned, the similarity is like the deep trenches.
Right.
But in the slum, it's a lot worse. Yeah. Right? There's the ghetto life, but then people are completely removed from systems, from education. And that was my reality as well. We grew up in a very difficult place. And in that time where I was unable to go to school, we live in extreme poverty. I found chess. I found it in a barbershop. I would always go there to watch other kids play video games. And one of these days, it just brought out a small plastic set. And, I was immediately fascinated by the way the pieces were. And, chess changed my life. That was when I found it. I was able to go back to school on a scholarship because I was so good at it. And, chess gave me a way to see the world and have ambition beyond the confines of where I grew up. And, 6 years ago, I decided that I was going to do the same thing for other children like me, using chess as a tool. So that was how that came about.
Man, that's very eye-opening because, when I was looking at something, I was watching you speak, and you said you dropped out of school when you were 10 years old.
Yeah.
For myself, I dropped out of school. I dropped out of high school in the 9th grade. I was around like 14 to 15. And one thing that my mom stressed to me when I did drop out of school was that I was going to have to work like 5 to 10 times harder than the person next to me. So I just wanted to know, did you go, how did that affect you mentally? Being a kid so young, living in the slums, having to drop out of school so early and figure things out, and then 2 years later you find chess, right?
Yeah.
So how was that for you at that time?
For me, it wasn't a choice because we could barely had enough to feed, right? So it was priorities, right? Would you rather go to school? And, education is such a long-term investment, right? But then families need to eat. They need to survive. And,
right.
My parents had to do a lot of menial jobs to put food on the table, and putting all of that into school, wasn't just a viable investment at a time. So I wanted to learn, and because I really had a bad foundational, education, it was just a no-brainer, right? Why not just drop out and do something to support the family? So for me, I had to grow up, really early. I missed out on a lot of childhood experiences. And maybe an interesting parallel, to yours was I did try, to do a few things to support my parents. And it was something that caused a deep pain for my mom because my parents were not educated as well. They also dropped out of school, at a really young age. And, they had to they lived a really hard life. So they didn't want to go through the same thing. And at the same time, they didn't have a choice because they couldn't afford it, right? So I guess for me, it was knowing that even at a really young age, that I had to, grow up. That my fight was different from the other kids. Like the other kids, if they had to do like 10 things, I had to do 100 things. So I already had that awareness at a really young age. And when I found chess, it just gave me my first real identity of that. Beyond that life of like hustling and struggle, like the greatest asset that you have is your mind.
Right.
And if you can build that capacity, you can be intellectually inclined and you can make your own choices.
Right. Man, that's powerful. It's crazy because like when you said the barbershop, right? Like that's the common ground for like discovery when I was a kid too.
For real?
Yeah, man. The barbershop is like, I felt like one of my best friends, he's no longer with us, but he's like my barber for years. And it was like my first therapist. You know what I mean? It's like, when you sit in that barber chair, you kind of feel free from everything in the world, right? Or you're sitting around and there's so many conversations. You got sports over here. You got people talking about relationships right here.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You get video games, you know what I'm saying? So it's so many different aspects to being in a barbershop. And just to hear that, like, because I've never actually been to Africa yet. I'm working on going. But to hear that over there is like, similarities is like kind of crazy to me. But one of the things that, coming up in the slums drives us to is desperation. And that desperation breeds a lot of talent, right? Were there any other things that you thought about doing when you were growing up where you figured, hey, maybe before you even discovered chess or even after, maybe a little bit after you discovered chess, what if I did this as well? Or what if I tried to do this? Is there anything, other things that you tried to figure out, like music, stuff like that?
Yeah, there were a couple of things because I was a really curious, teenager. And it was why, I got to really learn a lot of things. I got to learn how to play most music instruments. But, my reality was, and this is the thing about like growing up in the trenches, right? You're deeply influenced by the things that you can see. And those people that stand out as like models within that community are people, that have had to do like really hard things to survive. But then they become the shining examples for the younger ones. And let me give some more context. And, there's this, especially here in the West, there's always this constant joke about, Nigerian prince sending you, scam emails and all of that. And it's something that has deeply hurt the reputation of Nigeria because, when you tell people you're a Nigerian, that's the single story that has been propagated by the media, But the danger of the single story, it's not that it is untrue, but that it is incomplete. And that was the reality on the ground. Like, where I grew up, a lot of the kids wanted to get into internet scam because that was the only definition of success that they could see. And success would look like, this big brother in the community that, uses a BlackBerry. So if you use a BlackBerry phone and maybe he drives a Benz, so those are like the indicators, like the markers, that is how you spot most people. It's sort of like profiling, but it was... But that was it. So a lot of young people had those aspirations. And to me, too, I had those aspirations as well. Because, man, there were nights I saw my mom go to bed hungry, and I wanted to do something about that. So, but then I didn't have a mobile phone or a laptop, so I couldn't afford it. If someone had stepped in the gap and gotten me maybe a phone then or a laptop, I would have taken that path. And it really boils down to how, most of us like define morality, right? A lot of people do not have options. They don't have choices.
Right.
So at some point, I was almost really tempted to get into that, but thankfully I found chess, and that just set my life on a much different trajectory, where I learned to trust, my own mind, build my own confidence from within and do what is necessary, with the right mindset. So I got into music. I got to learn how to play the piano, the guitar, the drums.
Wow.
I picked up a lot of those interests, yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. I mean, man, I just feel like we're playing tennis with our similarities because one of the things that, when I have dropped out of school, it was like music, right? I found music and I wasn't a musician, but I had an ear for music and I figured out, just different ways to like work with artists and kind of propel them. And that led me to starting my career in music, which I worked at Rockefeller Records that was owned by Jay-Z, which I have a chess story about that I want to tell you, right? So I remember one time, I think I'm around like 19 years old, maybe 20, 19 to 20, I can't remember. And I'm in the studio, and in the studio there's a lounge. And Jay-Z's in there with his guy named Juan. And Juan is telling Jay about like this guy that can beat anybody in chess in one move, right? And he's like, so they're arguing. They're like Juan is like, yo, I seen it. It's on the news. It's this dude. He could beat you with one move or whatever. And Jay is like, ain't nobody. He's like, it's impossible. You can't beat somebody in one move, right? Right? So then he was like, so Juan is like, yo, he'll beat you in one move. And then like Jay, he turns and he looks at me. He's like, I'm Jay-Z. Ain't nobody beat me in one or nothing. Like, you know what I mean? So I have like these little inclinations of like chess in my life. Okay. So like when I was a kid, checkers is the first thing, right? Mm-hmm. And then like I got good at checkers as a kid, but then when it got to chess, it was like, I felt like it was a little bit too complicated for me. I didn't really understand the structure, but I don't think I really put the time in, right? Mm-hmm. So I wanted to talk to you about like just the time that it takes just learning just the basis, and not even just the game, but just the strategy and how that strategy can help people in life, like more than just the game.
Yeah. Wow, that's a really good question. And I like to think of like the contrast between chess and checkers, for example, because, people say this thing, chess, not checkers.
Yeah, right.
So there's a clear distinction between both. Think of checkers as a well, a deep well that you can draw water from.
Right.
And think of chess as an ocean, right? Mm. So it's a lot more, it's much broader, and it offers, infinite possibilities. Let me give you a quick analogy. For example, like after the first 4 moves in chess, right? Just you play, I play, you play, I play, 4 moves. Mm-hmm. The number of ways or the number of variations that could stem from that position, right? It's more than the number of atoms in the universe. So that is something that is almost mathematically infinite. So what I'm saying is, after the first 4 moves, the number of ways you can play that game is more than the number of atoms we have in the entire universe. So it runs into something with almost 120 zeros, right? So chess can be very complex, right? So the first real approach to learning shouldn't be from a place of complexity or trying to unravel that complexity, because it is hard, right? And that's the wrong way to learn. Now, a good way to think about it is to understand what chess can be to you. Because I believe the way you learn chess and the way you play it becomes like an extension of who you are, of your personality. So it's just like you're giving every other thing that you are expression. So chess is just another medium. Music is one medium, spoken words. So it's understanding your connection to the game. So that is where you find your chess personality. Am I an attacking player? Am I a positional player? Am I a patient person? Do I have a good blend of those? Am I dynamic? So when you understand yourself, you know thyself, then you have the right mindset to understanding complex theory.
Right.
So the next step is now learning the very basic rules, and you need a good teacher as well. Most people try to learn on their own and they run, or they try to just learn tricks. You don't need to learn tricks. You want to bring out your queen and learn the solid principle of the game. Let that guide you, right? Understand how the masters think about it. And the beauty of it is chess can be both science and art. There's a science to it because there are principles, but then you can break those rules, and let your creativity just fly from there. So when you understand what chess can mean to you, right, then you find a good basis for learning.
That's amazing, man. I think see, when I think about it, like you said, people say chess, not checkers, right? When it comes to the strategy of life, right? No matter how good things are or bad things are, people are all immune to the same things, right? So we all experience sickness and health, at one point or another in our lives. And I think that in life, just that terminology, chess, not checkers, people think that they have so many things figured out, when in life it's hard to really figure out anything, because I feel like as much as we do know, as much has been recorded, right? We're always learning, we're forever evolving. And it's just crazy how that analogy kind of speaks to what people need to focus on, which is like in life, sickness and health, man, taking care of yourself. Going back to chess in the slums, has there been people who have been involved, celebrities, that have gotten involved to try to help you amplify your voice and build you up?
Yeah, a couple. And I've always led with this philosophy since we started the Chess in Slums project that it is possible to do great things from a small place. I believe that great things can emerge from the most unlikely places. I lived all my life in Nigeria, and the first time I ever left, Africa was just in 2022.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but then I was exposed to a lot of wisdom, growing up. And when we started the project, the first 3 years were just in the dark. And I like to call them the decades when nothing happens. There are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen.
Wow.
So when the decades in a week started to happen was when I became a lot more active on social media. So I started using Twitter more, I started sharing more stories about the work that we do. And all of a sudden, one day, I made a post, and I just went to bed. And I just woke up, and everyone was calling me and said, go check your Twitter, go see something, what's going on? Like, oh, Paris Hilton just found your post. And, she had been campaigning for you guys online, and she's been trying to reach you. And I'm like, what do you mean Paris Hilton? Like, same Paris Hilton. I said, yeah. So I went online, she had sent me a message on Twitter. She was already campaigning. She had raised about $30,000 for us. And, and she sent me a message that, hey, Tunde, God bless you. I saw what you put out on Twitter and really deeply resonated with me. This is my number. This is my email. And I was like, wow, never would I have imagined that we could do work, in our own little community, and it would resonate with people from, another part of the world in that way. And, so that was the first real, global exposure that we had, but then since then we've had, Patrice Evra, even traveled down to Lagos, to visit our center. We've had a couple of celebrities, support our work, and yeah, it's been an interesting.
Man, that's. I just keep getting wild by all of this, right? Because I want to talk to you about mentality, right? So, people have this thing called the crabs in the barrel mentality, and people always use this analogy to describe other people by pulling people down. But one of the things about crabs in the barrel mentality is that a crab being in a barrel is not its habitat; it's survival, right? So what I wanted to know is where you're from in Nigeria. Is it hard to get people to understand that there are other things? Because you said you hadn't traveled outside of your country up until 2 years ago, right? So coming from where you come from, trying to being on the mission that you're on, do you sometimes face the challenges and not just chess alone, but people just believing in themselves and knowing that there's more for them in other places if they apply themselves how you have?
Yeah, another really good question. And I think, one of the greatest tragedies of poverty, right, is it affects the mind it conditions the mind to think, the only way to live is to survive, is to, trump other people, to try to survive, to try to break out, to do it against all odds. And it's such a damaging mindset, because if you don't have that understanding of abundance, it will be so hard to break out of that cycle. And that is the reality for a lot of people, and it's really hard, right? So poverty would first be a mindset thing, before even lack of resource. So it's trying to help people understand that, there's a way to live with this mindset of abundance rather than just survival. Because when you're just trying hard to survive, the next meal, you can't do anything, and you would make a lot of terrible compromises, right? Because everything becomes a means to an end for you, right? So I think for me, in my quest to through the work that I do, is to help people understand that, success shouldn't be a selfish one. Right, we need to have a communal understanding of success, and you can say that all day, but then it is more evidence when, through the work that I do, through the actions, and how we're trying to help the young people in these communities that we work with to understand that the only way to find success really is to give yourself in service to other things, to people, to the world. Right, it shouldn't just be, and even if you just live in excellent, you're doing the right things. That if it contributes to the greater good in some way, right. But you must always have that sense of duty, to where you're from, to your own people. And I think, that's always one way to think about it. And I share that through the work that I do, rather than just talk about it.
I seen you say something one time about the gift of thinking. Can you talk to me about just that ideology, the gift of thinking? One time I worked at a company, and I remember this guy, we were having a meeting, and he said, when it comes, he worked in the creative services department at a television station, and he was saying when it comes to creative, sometimes things get difficult because, budget, and you might have this idea, but it costs so much money, but it is free to think. So when, I seen you say the gift of thinking, right? Like, I just wanted to know more about that. How do you elaborate on that?
So, building, like having the capacity to think very critically about things, it's a rare gift because people are so distracted. Mm-hmm. People are so entertained, right? Not a lot of people, have truly, truly met themselves. And I think this is why, through the work that I do even, I've always said this, that education, beyond the four walls of a classroom, beyond the certifications, is the capacity for thought, right? The capacity for independent thinking, for critical thinking, for problem solving. And this is what I believe every human should, optimize for, to become thinkers, right? I think the thinkers are the ones that would save our civilization, right? Even in the work that we do, like chess is a game quite all right. It's a game that helps them, develop that gift of cognition, of thinking. Mm-hmm. But then when we raise that generation of thinkers from the slums, from these communities, what then happens, right? But it is the thinkers that will challenge the status quo, right? Mm-hmm. It is the thinkers that would solve the hard problems for Africa. It is the thinkers that would know that this is unacceptable. There has to be a better way to lead this continent. There has to be a better way to put our resource to better use. There has to be a better way to develop our human capacity, our human capital, right? So I believe, like the thinkers, they're the dreamers, mm-hmm. right? And chess is such a beautiful way to develop that capacity for thought because you're thinking through very complex ideas, through very complex positions. And in a world that distracts us, on social media, you're scrolling mindlessly. There's almost no space, right, to just be present with your own mind. Right? So chess is the game that gets you to sit down for 4 hours. I've played a game for 6 hours before.
6 hours.
And in the last few minutes, I just took my mind off the position and I lost. And it was so painful because you've played like 40 moves, good moves, mm-hmm. and you make just one wrong move in that moment. Mm-hmm. And that just cost you the game. So chess gets you to sit down for 4 hours. There are very few activities in the world right now that gives you that presence of mind, right? So I think for us to really advance, as people, in whatever it is we're doing, we need to spend more time in our own minds. We need to become more thinkers, and it's hard, especially in this world, but it is necessary.
Do you believe in retirement?
In retirement?
Yeah, because the reason why I'm asking, I know, you just getting started on a lot of stuff that you want to do, right? But I think that in just in America, right? Like we have this idea of reaching a certain amount of money, reaching a certain amount of notoriety or a certain amount of work. And once you reach that certain amount or whatever it is, like you just, I don't have to do anything anymore. And honestly, for me, I think that's ridiculous because I'm of retirement standards age and I'm still acting like I'm just starting, right? So I just wanted to know your perspective on retirement.
Okay, so that's another cultural thing, right? Mm-hmm. Some culture shock thing. Because, man, in Nigeria, bro, we don't retire, man. Everyone is still grinding. Yeah. There's no such thing as retirement. Mm-hmm. Everyone is grinding well into their old age. And I think for me, it depends. I think when you find what you love very deeply, I think you'll find new ways to reinvent yourself at every point, right? It doesn't always have to be about money, right? People think retirement comes from comfort. Oh, I now have, this racks, sitting in my accounts. I can now just look back and just, relax and have fun and not work or do anything. So I think the real disconnect here is that people are doing work that they do not love.
Right.
So they can't wait
for it to be over, right?
Exactly. They can't wait for it to be over. And, when they have some financial security and bro, not doing this again. So, so that's that. There's a gap, right? There's a gap between what you're doing and, the things you're passionate about. Man,
one thing I learned, and of course, growing up in New York, it's a melting pot. And especially I'm from Harlem, you know what I mean? And it's a lot of African people in Harlem. It used to be a cab driver that he used to always consistently pick me up. I would call the base and ask for him. And I remember one time Like, we were on our way to my destination. He asked me, he said, yo, do you mind if I stop for a second? I'm like, go ahead. So he stops at like a place that sells like white t-shirts, underwear, socks, like, you know, they call it the white tee spot, like in the hood or whatever. So I asked him, I was like, how much? I said, he's like, that's my brother's spot. I was like, how much did it cost for him to get that? So he told me, and he said basically the plan that they had was, he said it was him and his 2 brothers. And when they came to America, they disciplined themselves. And I mean, this would even be hard for me to do, but he said, yo, for a whole year, all we ate was fish and rice, right? Whoa. He said that's all we ate for, like, we said we would cook together, we would sit down, we would all eat together at the same time, and they would work all these jobs. And he said, you know, after a year or 2, I can't remember, but it was a year or 2 of them working and saving up their money, his brother opened his store. His other brother opened, they have these places called like Mama's Fried or Kennedy's Fried Chicken. He opened up one of those, right? And his other brother opened up something, and he was still driving a cab, but he was like, his idea is to own a base, right? And I wanted to talk about like discipline, you know what I mean? Like coming from where you come from. Like, I do have a level of discipline, but there's a level of discipline I don't have because the options here are so various, right? Like, I could just, like today, like French fries, I could have the greatest French fries in the world, right? And somebody could say, yo, it's this other spot, and they got good French fries too, and I could be like, oh, I'm going there, like, you know what I mean? Because I have that option. So I want to talk to you about like just the level of discipline that you grow up having.
Okay, so I think like in my household and a lot of like the influence, you know, within the community, it's, you know, there are no safety nets, right? So I think when you have safety nets, right, it's a lot easier to be reckless and to be very impulsive, because you always have something to fall back on.
Right.
But for us, you know, there was no plan B. So, you know, you had to like understand that you don't have that leeway to be reckless. So from a really young age, right, you have to be disciplined. Like, you don't even have a choice, right? There's no, but I think when I started learning chess, also, like, it helped me understand like the power of focused thought. There are 2 things that chess has really helped like deepen my understanding of. It's the power of focused thought and delayed gratification, right? So when people understand that, you know, because how does the world advance? Like, how do we like define the moral compass of any society? It's by what we reward and the things that we frown against. Right. If society rewards something, a lot of people would do it, like incentives, right? So it's, you know, for us, for me, it was, okay, what is the reward system that I will set up for myself? Right? And how do I want to condition my mind that it cannot be instantly gratified? Because any instant gratification you get, there's always a price to pay for it, you know, in the future. So really understanding the concept of delayed gratification, that I can make a lot of sacrifices now, I can delay a lot of things now, I can learn to be disciplined and follow this one path. Be the man that practices one kick, you know, 10,000 times rather than 10,000 kicks, right? You know, then you understand that there's a reward at the end of it. And that reward, you know, comes with a lot more substance, right? At the end of it. So some of these things like helped like deepen my understanding of what it means to have true discipline, right? And build strong character. Because what you do in those times that people are not watching, you know, that is what helps you build proper character. And that is what discipline is. People virtue signal all the time, oh, that they're doing this. But then it's all lies at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And the worst thing you can do is lie to yourself. So when you really understand the concept of delayed gratification, I think it helps you find, you know, a clear framework to think about discipline, right? I mean, in your own case now, for the fries, you know that every decision you're making at this age, you won't, like, the consequences of it.
The consequences, right.
They'll wait for you in the future.
Right.
So think of the decisions you make now, not for your own enjoyment or satisfaction, but for that future when, man, you'll be older and,
and
you want to spend more time with your kids, and so you eat healthy,
Man, I'm really like enjoying this conversation for a lot of reasons, but like when I found out, you know, that, you know, you didn't finish school as a young man, and just sitting with you and speaking with you and hearing how intelligent you are, right? Like for myself, like, I was really discouraged, you know what I mean, by not finishing school, because I came up in a time where everybody was saying that, yo, if you don't get at least a minimum of high school diploma, you're not gonna be anything, right? Like you're not gonna be nothing. And I mean, statistically, I've defied those odds, right? Like I'm way above average, right? But it was a long journey, and to hear, another young brother from a place that like maybe a little bit similar to mine, and hear like how intelligent you are, man. You speaking to me. I ain't gonna lie, man, because it's tough.
Thank you, bro.
Like for real, man. Just growing up, it's tough. Like when you being a high school dropout, like man, the level that you're counted out on is insane. And I don't advocate. That's one thing. I don't advocate for any young kids to not go to school. Like my oldest daughter just graduated last year from an Ivy League school,
wow.
head of her class, you know what I mean? Full academic scholarship, way smarter than anybody in the family, you know what I mean? But I do, try to have like these open conversations so that people don't get discouraged, because everybody's not gonna have the same path, right?
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's something else that you had spoke on that I really wanted to touch on. You said that Africa is the future workforce of the world.
Yeah.
And when I seen that, I was like, wow, you know what I mean? Because, it wasn't until, and I'm not going to say it wasn't until, because there are people who have a perception, like you said, of Nigerians, or people have a perception of Africa overall, right? Like people think you go to Africa and it's just like animals running through the street, or and I'm not trying to be funny, but people think of like the movie Spears and all this crazy stuff, and they have this perception until the movie Black Panther comes out, right? And when the movie Black Panther comes out, everybody's like, oh, Africa, everybody's going to Africa. But then we start hearing about how Nigeria is like kind of like the Wakanda, you know what I mean, of the world. And I just wanted to hear about the future of
Workforce,
of the workforce coming from Africa.
So the funny thing, or the interesting thing about like perception, like from a distance, is people feed directly into this like stereotypes, this wrong narratives, this story that serves another person's interest in the media, because every wrong news, every like propaganda, is carefully curated, in the interest of someone in the background that you don't see. Right. Africa has a lot of potential, and the speech I gave when I said Africa was the future workforce of the world was at the DOD conference in Germany, and and I wanted people to know that, listen, right now, right, Africa's resource, it's the raw materials, all the iPhones people use here, all of that, 80% of the raw material that is needed to make an iPhone is gotten from the Congo. And you see like millions of children working in the mines, in terrible, terrible situation. And you begin to wonder, like, the world is really using Africa for its resource, right? But then the world is constantly evolving, right? The fourth industrial revolution will be led by technology. Like software is eating the world, right? So, and Africa has missed out on the first, the second, the third industrial revolution. This is the fourth one, and this is led by the internet. And thankfully, the internet it's a democracy, right? Opportunity is democratized because of the internet, right? And in a couple of years, Nigeria particularly would have the youngest population in the next 50 years of young people in the entire world. Right now we have the highest population of 15 to 17-year-olds in the world, right? So what happens then in the next 50 years, in the next 30 years? Europe, in most parts of Europe, they already have a dying population. A lot of the old people, they're retiring. And so who's going to build the future then? If it is Africa. So Africa's greatest resource, it's not the raw materials. It's the human capital. It's the strength of youth, the people. Those are the people that will build, and that is why it is important that we're able to invest the right skill. That we forget about like petroleum, whatever that we have. All of that in a couple of years, would have EV vehicles, would probably have no need for gas, for cars anymore, right? So, gas, becomes irrelevant. Then what happens? So our greatest investment has to be in the people, right? This young people. I'm able to stand here and come to places like this and do this because, even despite not having like the greatest education, I found a way to educate myself and build capacity and become skillful. Because when you do that, the world will judge you for many things, for the color of your skin, for what you look like, for the way you speak, for what you're wearing. But one thing that can never be taken away from you is your ability, the skill that you have, the capacity that you've built, the knowledge that you have. No one could ever take that away from you. And you go anywhere in the world and you're the best at what you do, you'd get the right opportunities that you deserve because you've earned it. And I think that is what Africa needs right now because, there's a renaissance happening. The world is, really taking all our resource, the raw materials, and they're taking it. But then they're not taking the raw materials, which is our people. They're taking the finished materials of our people, which is the educated folks back in Africa. They migrate here. In Nigeria, we call it Jakpa. They migrate here, they get an education, then they work here. Right. And the world uses them for that. Right. But our raw materials, which are the people, they term them refugees, the uneducated ones, the ones that probably have no skill. Then when they come here, they reject them because they're refugees. So you see what is happening here. But they take our raw material, which is the resource, but then they reject our own finished materials. Right. The world doesn't buy finished products from Africa. Right. They would rather take the raw materials, right, and refine it. Right. So there has to be a shift. Right. Our greatest resource, it's a human capital. But right now it is raw. And if you can find a way to really harness that, help a lot of young people get educated, leverage technology, the internet, teach them how to use the internet, how to become software engineers, how to be deeply educated, how to be skillful, then the world will have no choice in a couple of decades than to have them build the technology that the world will need. So that is the human capital that we have. That is the future workforce of the world.
When along your journey, did you once or ever feel that once you reached a certain level of intelligence, of networking, did you feel like a social responsibility? Because a lot of people, greed is something that doesn't discriminate, right? Like, no matter what class, group, background, racial, faith, whatever, people have greed. And some people, see themselves in position, and power is a tough thing to deal with, right? And some people get into positions of powers and they use that to take advantage of people. Did you feel like as you were growing and learning all of this stuff, you like, yo, I got a social, like I could really change shit around here. Like I could really do something with this. Talk to me about that, man. Like,
yeah, so it was hard at first. I think what you're really talking about is influence. Because the moment you start doing something meaningful, something the world is starting to care about, right? It comes with a lot of attention, right? And I mean, for different people, it's many things. It's you're a musician, you start out, you're doing your own thing in the studio, then all of a sudden you put it out into the world and people love it and the labels come and you become famous and, your life is just entirely there in the public, right? And it's such a hard thing to navigate, especially for me that took the unconventional path because it was like, who cares about chess, really? It was like, how do you even become famous from playing chess or from teaching chess to kids? So it was that for me at first, like just doing something quietly that a lot of people did not understand or care about. Then all of a sudden, we had a viral moment some 3 years ago, and all of a sudden, I went from having like maybe 100 followers, and 2 likes or 1 like on my post to like having over 300,000 followers, from all over the world. And it just kept growing on my Twitter and it just kept growing. And every time I would go out, people would look at me and be like, oh, you're the chess guy. Oh, they walk up to me, they want a picture. And it was so hard to navigate that. But what I didn't understand then was that I was gaining a lot of influence. And there's a clear difference between being famous and being influential.
Right.
Anyone can be famous, man. Right. You can be famous for twerking on Instagram, whatever.
Right.
But when you have influence, I think it's so much more powerful. Like, people care deeply about what you have to say. And that's power. Like, so you could say that, oh, you guys should do this to benefit the lives of some other people. And people believe that because you're the one saying it. And I started to understand that power. There was a day that there was a kid, that needed like, an emergency like medical intervention.
Excuse me.
And just because I talked about it, like we're able to raise like $30,000 for that kid.
Wow.
In just one day, and that is such a scary thing to have. Like, because you said something, people care so deeply about it enough to like want to be a part of it. You know, you say something and you're able to galvanize action, right? So I think for everyone, like, we all have some influence. It can even be within our own immediate circle, our own network, and our influence is connected to the gifts that we have. Right. For you, I think it's the gift of eloquence. You ask the right questions. You know how to hold the conversation, and because of that, people will be drawn to you. Right. So that would give you influence. It gives all of us some influence in whatever that we do. Right. And we must understand that influence comes with a responsibility. Yeah. You know, just like in Spider-Man, it says with great power comes great. Yeah. So that responsibility is not for our own gratification. It's for others. So that is when you're able to pull up a brother, bring someone else on that stage to that spotlight. Right. So that is what I'm learning to use my influence to do, to extend that spotlight to other people, you know, to the children I'm advocating for, to begin to draw the world into more meaningful conversations rather than like the frivolous things that we see on social media. And, you know, it's still like deep water to navigate, but because my life is entirely out there. But then I'm using it for something really positive.
For the right things. You familiar with Cenat?
Sorry?
Cenat?
Yeah, I know him. Yeah,
yeah.
So was in Nigeria recently.
Yeah, I wanted to know what you thought about, you know, the trip. I thought it was like, you know, I think that so many people give this young brother so much flack. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because, you know, and I'm not gonna say he's just, but for me, I'm entertained by him. Like I was born in the Bronx and I moved to Harlem, but like he epitomizes what the Bronx is, right? And the Bronx is fun, it's funny, it's educational in ways. And I thought that like with him going out there, you're gonna have your people who say, oh, he's just clout chasing or he's just trying to get a rise. But like if he sincerely, well, I believe that he sincerely, because I don't look at him as a fake person, you know, him sincerely saying that he wants to build a school, you know, schools out there. Man, how does that even make you feel? Like you said, using influence, right? Like how does that even make you feel?
Exactly, yes. Oh, yeah, I like him. I really like him. Yeah. And, you know, when he was in Nigeria, the company that like managed like the whole like PR thing for him, like it was owned by my friend, and you know, the community, one of the communities he visited, we also built a school there, you know, for children. And, you know, when he came so the thing is, you know, when you do good in the world, like the world tells you to like tone it down, right? Oh, don't post it, don't talk about it, you know, whatever. But then if you buy a Lamborghini and you post it, everyone says, wow, this, that. So why exactly do you think, you know, the world is so bothered by you, like just being a kind person and sharing some of that kindness, right? So it really tells you, like, you know, the world, you know, is inherently selfish, right? And when you do some good, you know, who cares? Whatever is a streamer and he decides to use some of that money to do some good. That's something, like, you may think it's clout chasing, but then there are children that will get a good school because of that, right? And you don't even know the half of it because most people live in a bubble. They've been shielded by their own privilege. But then for a child, being able to like go to school, you know, it's something that could change their lives forever. Something as simple as just, you know, being able to go to school because they can't afford it. They live in extreme poverty. And the fact that when he came, he saw that need, he identified that need, and is choosing to invest in that. Right. Man, he has my respect for life, right?
That's amazing.
And you know, it never disrespected our culture or anything. No. He came, he had a great time. It was really funny. And I think, you know, Nigeria, you know, Lagos in December is the fun place to go. I think more people will come to Lagos because of this trip. So all around, I think it was a positive one. And,
no, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Like, when I seen it, I just got influenced, you know, by it. And like I said, I've been wanting to go for years. Of course, it's, you know, it is pricey because I'm not traveling by myself. I got kids in White Village. It's a little pricey. But at the same time, I think that, like, you know, we need to amplify our education when it comes to Africa, right? Yeah. There's a ton of conversations in between that where people have like things that they want to say, there are things they don't agree with, but beyond that, I feel like together we're stronger, right? Like just me and you sitting and having a conversation, talking about chess and life. There's somebody, you know, from where you're from that may see this and be like, damn, I identify with even me, you know what I mean? Because when I started like listening to you, I'm like, oh, this brother like. You know, the things you saying, like the barbershop, I'm like, yo, that's crazy. The barbershop is the common ground. Yo, for real, man. So it's I wanted to also talk to you about, like, you know, briefly, like gaming, right? Like now that we're seeing that video games have become like a way to means, and there are professional players that are able to make ways for themselves by gaming. Is there ways to implement chess into that, right? Like, to do online chess or tournaments or things of that nature, where you can now start. Some of these kids that's learning how to some of these kids that are learning how to play chess could potentially be gamers. You know what I mean, and make means for themselves where they're from.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when COVID happened, and so two things happened, right? That put chess, in popular culture. COVID, so everyone was stuck at home.
Trying to figure out stuff to do. Yeah, right.
So people started playing more chess. I remember the biggest website in the world, chess.com. They went from having like 10 million users to over 100 million users in that period.
Wow.
So then the second thing that happened was, Netflix released an original, Queen's Gambit.
Yes.
Yeah, and it became the most viewed series of all time. I think maybe before Squid Games came along. And yeah, millions of people got into chess. I mean, I was, back home in Nigeria, I was getting emails from people that were looking for chess coaches. So I had to set up a virtual class. I was earning in dollars for the first time. It was a great time. And so and that was also the birth of a lot of chess streamers. We have Hikaru Nakamura, Gotham Chess, Agad Mater, the Butthead sisters. They started getting millions of followers. I think most of them have over 2 million followers on Twitch even. And, they started streaming chess. And chess became, at some point, the number one most streamed game on Twitch. This happened during COVID. It was number one above Fortnite. Yeah, it happened. Yeah.
Wow.
So it created a new wave of opportunity, for grandmasters, chess professionals, and I didn't get on that wave, because, I didn't even have the setup. I didn't know how to go about it. But the interesting thing was in December, I got on Twitch with a couple of people at Chess.com, just play chess and talk about the work that we do. And on that stream, we raised about $18,000, just on a 3-hour stream, just talking about chess and playing chess. And people were watching. Okay. Right. So I think, the chess era is moving to a more digital landscape. And for the children, we're also trying to position them. A lot of the kids were trained. They're playing at very advanced level, right? Even almost master level for a lot of them. And there's a demand. Chess coaching is like a $2 billion industry. A lot of people want to learn chess, but they don't know how to do it, right? Or they don't know where to find that information, right? So I think if we can position the kids to be able to teach adult improvers in the US and the UK and Europe, they can earn virtually. So we're setting that up, we're setting up the digital infrastructure for that. And for me personally, I'm trying to, find that perfect blend between the work that I do and also exploring new path as a chess coach and just taking on maybe HNIs, teaching them chess and just seeing where it leads. But it's an exciting time for chess.
Yeah, man. No, this has been so eye-opening, so interesting because man, I mean just learning about all I wouldn't know that that was the most streamed game during COVID time
above Fortnite. Yeah.
Wow, man. I mean, the possibilities of the things that you're talking about are endless, right? And what is, I don't think that we have an end goal, right? Because people sometimes they say, well, what is the ultimate goal? But it's more so predicated on what's the mission, right? Because the mission never ends. You know what I mean? Especially when you're doing things like this, helping people. Where does the mission go? Where does it continue for you?
That's a really good question.
Listen, I just want to point out there that I asked Tunde a lot of good questions today. You feel me?
Yeah. I mean, the questions that I have to really think about, right? Because and I don't have all the answers really.
Right.
Because for me, I know this is my life's work, right? And, I'm 29 now and maybe in a few years, I'd have my own family, get married and priorities might change. And it's such a hard thing to grapple with because now I know that this is my life's work. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life, to help more children in the slum communities find their place in the world and to do it on their own terms and to have the right skills and knowledge, right, to build the future they want for themselves, to not be defined by their parents' poverty or by the situation or environment they were born into. And I've dedicated the last 6 years of my life to doing that every single day. And when I wake up every day, it's what can I do better? How can I spend more of myself and my abilities to, create more spaces for the children to thrive.
Right.
Because every time you do that, you widen human empathy, and empathy is a gift, right? So to me, it's like there's no exit point now, as far as I can see, right? What I see is that this will continue to grow bigger, and I've just really connected it to a vision that if we can give this gift of chess, of critical thinking, of education to 1 million children across slums in Africa, then we can build critical mass. If you have 1 million educated thinkers, chess players, empowered people from the worst places, 1 million of them, and that is an ambitious goal, right? Then we have critical mass. And not only will they be people that can contribute meaningfully to developing our society, developing Africa, but they would also have that deep sense of duty to their own people, right? I'm only able to do this because I grew up in poverty and I know what it means to be hungry. I know what it means to, now I can do the same thing for other children like me. Right. And if there are 1 million people with that sense of responsibility to their own communities, then, would have that shared prosperity. And I don't think that is the kind of work that has an end to it. It's a continuous work that will never end. But at the same time, there has to be some balance. And I'll tell this, this final story. There was this kid, at the beach, the water had washed up like thousands of starfishes, to shore. Mm-hmm. And it was just picking them up one by one and throwing them back into the ocean so they don't die. And there were millions of them, washed up. And this man just looked at this kid and told him that this is pointless. Like, what are you doing? Like, you'll never be able to throw all of them back into the ocean. So why even bother? It's a waste of time. And the kid just looked at him unfazed, and he picked up another starfish and he threw it back in, and he picked up another one and he showed him and said, it would matter to this one starfish, and he threw it back into the ocean. And he just went about doing it. And when you think about the problem in its true complexity, like reaching 1 million children, it looks really hard, and you may never be able to do that, but you can start with one. Right. And that is what I choose to do every day. Start with one.
Man. Yo, that's tough, yo. That's tough, man. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your time and your education and your patience, man. Like, because, us just getting to dive in and learn about one another just for the love of, the game of chess, and me learning about it, man, it's been so dope, so educational. I think by the time that when you do start your family, like, whether you have a boy or a girl, the first thing is going to be a chess set.
Absolutely.
Well, I thank you, brother.
That is what I give all my friends as gifts.
Appreciate you, brother.
This is incredible. Thank you so much for having me.
And that's Cxmmunity Media, y'all. Peace.